Hello, and welcome. I'm so excited. Thank you for being here. So, I'm Erin. This is Ageless Beauty with Erin, and today we are, doing an Evil Lives Here. It's been too long. It's been way too long, about a year. So, bear with me. I have had already some technical difficulties because I couldn't remember how I had anything set up. And I had to get everything back in order. So my notes are over here, my camera's here, my makeup's all here. I hope I have it all. But let me tell you, I've done a test run and it didn't go so well. So I'm hoping second time's a charm. Anyways, as I stated, this is Ageless Beauty with Erin. And I just want to point out a few things. There has been little confusion, a little backlash. I am a beauty channel. Like, I do two types of videos. One is a get ready with me where we sit down, we test new makeup, we look at new things, try new looks. I won't say always, but I go places a lot and I like to look for a look and something kind of different, and we do that. And then I have the Evil Lives Here. Now, if you're not familiar with Evil Lives Here, it is a TV program on the Discovery Channel. So I sit down and I watch a TV show. A TV show where the people that I'm talking about are telling their stories. And I'm telling you what I've seen and we're discussing it. Now, I do my makeup while I discuss this channel. Or this show, excuse me. And I don't talk about makeup, so everything I'm using will be listed below in the comments. But other than doing makeup, it's just something for me to do while we are talking. And then I actually have had people upset about this show or about me doing this while doing makeup. And I just want to point out that the people I talk about voluntarily, well, they probably got paid, but either way, sat down and did this show and told their story. So I didn't go intrude into anybody's life. I didn't go and look up specifics. At the end, I look up specifics of the episode, but I try to leave the innocent alone. I try to leave those that don't want to be a part of it alone. And I talk only about the people in the show. So I apologize if it has offended a few people. Never been my intention. Like I said, I'm just sitting here discussing true crime, which is a passion of mine, while doing makeup, which is another passion of mine, and putting it together. So if that is not your thing, I get it. It was nice that you came, but you don't have to stay. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy the video. And like I said, give me a little grace as I get back into it. But I'm excited to be back. I forgot how much work was in doing these shows, but I love it. So here I am. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. And hopefully you've checked out my other videos, but if you haven't, check them out as well. Like I stated, down below will be everything that I am using that we are not discussing. So if you have a question on something, hit me up. I'm available in the comment section. I'm available by my personal email. I am, Facebook, Instagram. I'm available. It's all listed below. And also, don't forget to check out my ambassador codes. So go check out my links and use my code for a discount. So speaking of that, future Erin is going to talk about one of those ambassador codes and products. So I'll be back. Hi guys. Okay, breaking in real quickly to talk about what I'm having for lunch today. Yeah, doesn't it look amazing? So let's discuss what I've got here. It tastes so good. I have got my 1-Up Nutrition. I took half a scoop of lemon Italian ice, half a scoop of strawberry Italian ice, put it in with my strawberry lemonade collagen,
Added a cup of frozen strawberries, and I'm in heaven. This is literally 80 calories, 25 calories, and 50 calories for the strawberries. 155 calories, 34 grams of protein. And I feel like it is so good. So good. So, go over to oneupnutrition.com. Get you some protein, get you some collagen. I don't know, what do you need? Magnesium, L-carnitine, sleeping aid, gut health, greens and reds. Go check it out. I recommend it all. There's one thing I'm not a fan of. Hit me up and I'll tell you what it is and why. But when you're there, use the code ERIN20. Get 20% off your order. Guys, I can't talk about this stuff enough. I love it. I have collagen in 4 different flavors right now. I've used it coffee. If I don't have a coffee for the day, I'll use it like this. I have 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different flavors of protein. I never have to say it, have the same thing twice. I really don't. I said that before. I mean that. And I have so much other stuff. Go check it out. You won't be sorry. And now, back to my show.
All right, so I think I'm ready. I've got a drink, got my inhaler. I'm a little wheezy. I'm not sure, something has set my asthma off, so if you hear me, I apologize. If I take a little longer to take a breath, I apologize, but we'll work through that. I've got my phone on Do Not Disturb. My dogs are outside, though I do not guarantee that you won't hear them, or they'll be asking to come in and out. You know, if you've been with me for a while, you know. And on that note, let's just get started. So we are doing The Evil Lives here. Like I said, it goes on in Discovery Channel, so the newer seasons are still playing. I'm on season 3, episode 12, so it's the last episode of season 3. And so much for being on Do Not Disturb. I need to check that. Anyways, so I believe I saw there's like 12 seasons. So the newer seasons are still on the ID or Discovery Channel. I watch through the ID app. It's a monthly subscription. I'm not sitting here trying to sell you anything, but if you want to watch any of these older episodes, like if you want to watch the episode that we are discussing today, you would probably need the ID app and a monthly subscription, unless it just happens to be playing on a repeat. So that being said, this is titled The Monster Inside Him, and it was originally aired April 8th, 2018. So I'm a little behind, we know, but I didn't start in 2018 anyway, so I would have been behind no matter what. So as I mentioned, we're going to be I watched this episode, I sat down, I took notes, and now we're going to discuss this episode. And we start with meeting 2 females, Karen Williams and Vernita Cockerham. And apparently it says these 2 were strangers until, let's see, they were brought together by what Richard Ellerby did to them. So, if you've watched Evil Lives Here, if you've been watching any of my episodes, they're very stingy on facts. And I get so frustrated with this because you don't get dates, times, places, anything like that. And you kind of have to feel it out. And sometimes you try to make sense of it and it doesn't make sense. So this time, this was one of those, and I'll struggle throughout this episode on dates and ages because I couldn't figure it out. I do check at the end. It's always one of the first things I ask when I go back. When was this taking place? Try to put some perspective in it, and I'll talk about that as we go because this is definitely one of those that needed that perspective. But either way. So Richard is the bad guy. We're going to be talking to Karen and Vernita. And try to make it as simple as I can because the show will flip back and forth sometimes. And they don't do it as much this time. This time you hear from Karen and her story up to a point, and then you pick up at Vernita and her story to the end. So it's almost like 2 chapters of Richard's life that we're hearing. And that's probably a really good way to state that. And Karen starts us off. And she says that she's nervous to be there, but she felt that it was time to tell her story. So again, for those of you that are wondering how I could, be sitting here doing makeup and talking about someone's tragedy, she's talking about this. She needs to discuss this. And I will say the same thing for Vernita. They both need this. And this episode was a way for them to discuss what happened to them. So, hopefully you can understand that. Okay, anyways, I'm sorry. The comment that I got really kind of bothered me because I don't feel like I'm delving into anybody's personal life. This is a TV show that we're discussing. I'll get over it. Okay. So, Karen's nervous, but it's time to tell her story. She says there are demons in this world, and Richard was one of them. He was evil. Okay. And then Vernita picks over one of the few times that they cut into each other's segments and says that what Richard did to her will haunt her for the rest of her life. And that is an understatement. She says he tried to hide a lot of what he was and who he was. But when there's a monster inside you, you can't hide it. It comes out. She says that, quote, Richard was a demon who walked this earth, end quote. I agree with her wholeheartedly. Now, both women have called him a demon and said that he's evil. And I've got to say, if I ever agreed with anything, I agree with that. So, now, if you have been with me, you know how much I love this intro. How much I love their intro, and I wish I could play it for you or put part of it on here. I'm really not sure what the rules about that are. Probably copyright infringements and all that, so I'm not going to, but I love their intro. I don't know what it is, but it's great, and it just leads up to the show. So we start the show, like I said, talking to Karen. And Karen tells us that she is the 10th sibling and doesn't necessarily specify it, but I think she's the youngest, okay? But she's 10 out of how many siblings they've got. It's never specified. There's only one other instance that a sibling is even mentioned, so other than Richard. And she talks about Richard being her brother. He's an older brother, but I think they were pretty close in age, honestly, but it never specifies. But the reason I say that, and the reason I think that, is they spent a lot of time together. They did a lot of things together. So, like, she said he was her partner in crime, her playmate. They did everything together, and she said the best part about it was he wasn't forced to spend time with her. Like, in a lot of cases, siblings are forced to spend time together. It just, it could be many things. It could be that's the only playmate you have. It could be, which I would think if you got 10 siblings, that wouldn't be the case. But that could be the only thing you have. You know, it depends on the time that this is in. There might not have been TV, or not TVs, but like PlayStations or Xboxes or whatever. You know, you spent your time outside playing with somebody, and your sibling would be that person. And in this case, sorry, I need to make sure I'm on Do Not Disturb. I am, so I don't know why everything keeps coming through. Okay, anyways, so, yeah, they spent a lot of time together. They played together. She said it was a happy childhood, okay? And, you know, if you're like I am, you hear something like, oh, it was a great childhood, We were so happy. And then in my head, I'm hearing that dun 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 until we're not. And I know, I'm a little weird about that. But then she proceeds to tell us that her dad was military. And what she doesn't tell us, of course, we don't find out where they even live at during this show, but what she doesn't tell us, and that I do find out later, is they traveled a lot. So, like, Richard was born in Germany, and I don't know if any of the other siblings were or not. Like I said, I didn't look it up. I didn't even look up Karen, where she was born or when she was born. Just looked up Richard's. But he was born in Germany. They no longer lived in Germany. They lived in the States, which it is not mentioned. I will go on and tell you because it became such a thing for me. Like, where do they live? They are living in New Jersey. They're growing up in New Jersey. I can't remember what city. But anyways, so her dad is in the military. And they traveled, and they are in New Jersey at this time. And one day he goes to work, has a heart attack, and as she says, their world completely changed. And I get that. So now you've got a widowed mom, 10 children. 10. And, yeah. Life as you know it is over. So, I don't know. But like I said, Richard was always her protector. He looked out for her. He played with her. And things were just good. But then she started noticing things, and she couldn't quite figure it out. So now she knows a name for it. Then she wasn't quite sure. So she said she would be going into another room, and he would just be standing there making the worst faces, like some expressions she couldn't understand. And she said he just looked like he was mad, just so mad. She said he'd even be standing there by himself with his fist just balled in rage. And she's like, of course she's young, but she's like, what is he mad about? He is in a room by himself. What could possibly have set him off? She didn't know, and wisely, she's like, anytime she caught him like that, she would just excuse herself, not even let him know not even let him know she saw him, and just quietly back out, you know. And later, she's like, I know, you know, obviously these were anger issues and problems that he was having, but at the time, she had no idea. She really didn't know what was possibly making him so angry. And now they show her a picture. And they do this a lot. That's one of the good things that I really like about Evil Lives Here, is they show you pictures of them during the time that they're talking about, right? If it's available. And Karen is looking at this picture, and I can't tell how many people are actually in this picture because there's a lot of them blurred out. I know there's a bunch of kids. It looks like mom. They're all blurred out except for Richard. Like, I don't even know if Karen's in this picture. But you see Richard, and they're all standing around a table. So it's like a kitchen table. They're all standing around it, and it looks like a birthday cake. And it doesn't look like it's Richard's birthday cake, but there's a birthday cake. And at least that's what it looks like. It's a cake. And she says that was probably, let me find it, one of the last of the good times that they had. She said at this point of his life is when she started noticing he was changing. And he was becoming what she called more controlling, his way or no way. And she says, and I quote, he was still kind of happy. He was still okay, but it was starting to change, end quote. And I think, honestly, she noticed there was some changes and some things that weren't quite right, but at the same time, it wasn't affecting her, at least not yet. And so she just kind of shrugged it off. You know, he was enough of his old self that she didn't get into the weeds of what was going on with him, ignoring the warning signs. So sometimes I mean, we all do it. Come on, we're human. We all ignore warning signs on something in our life that we have seen or done. But then she said he started acting on his anger. And that's when she really got scared. So at this point, she tells us a story of some pet turtles that they have. Now, I will say, I'll give a trigger warning here because it does talk about potential abuse of animals. This was not in detail. There is another part in the story I will mention as well. So this one's not bad, but you get the idea. Later on, I will give a much more of a trigger warning. So she says that her and Richard shared turtles. And I'm going to say, my son had turtles. And I thought they were just he had one turtle, I should say. He had one turtle, and I was just like, I'd never do it again. And he never took care of it either, which was the problem. So it was stinky, and the turtle got so big. Like, I couldn't believe how big his turtle got. But we had put him in a big aquarium, and they grow to their surroundings. Anyways, I digress. So they had a turtle. Actually, according to the reenactment, they had 3 turtles. So she said one day she went in there. She was just going into the room. She was going to talk to him. And I don't know, do you play with turtles? It's just, So she was going in to see the turtles. And Ricky was on the floor and had all 3 turtles on the floor with him, belly up. So all 3 of them were laying on the shells with their stomach up. And she was asking, what are you doing? Because obviously not good. I mean, I really don't know enough about turtles to say it's bad if they're that way for a very long time. And I'm sure it is for a long time, it would be bad. Anyways, so she's asking him, what are you doing? Whatever. And he gets so mad at her. Like, he yells at her and tells her, these are my turtles. I'll do what I want. Yada, yada, yada. You can't tell me what to do, right? She's like, it was just weird. She didn't understand. She said, and then, so she says a lot without saying anything. She's like, then they died. And we got new turtles. And then they died. And we got them again. And again, and again, and again. And she said, and I never questioned why they were dying. Okay. But she's noticing, she's seeing these things. There's a lot of this that goes on. I'm wondering about Mom, the other siblings, or whatever, but they're never mentioned. And I know Mom was probably doing the best that she could do. And let's be honest, 10 kids, yeah, she was doing the best that she could. Anyways, where we at? She said, and then one night, she became the target of his rage. Like, scary shit type stuff. So she said one night she was asleep in her room, in her bed. She was having this weird nightmare. Like, felt like she was underwater or something. She couldn't breathe. And she was struggling and fighting and whatever. And she woke up to realize that it wasn't a dream. Ricky was, and I forgot to mention that Karen calls Richard Ricky. So in the story when she talks about him, it's Ricky, and I apologize, I should have mentioned that before. But Ricky is sitting on top of her on the bed with a pillow over her face, holding her down. So she was terrified. I mean, come on, we all would be terrified. And she's fighting and screaming and struggling, and he's just having the time of his life, I guess. I really don't know. But then he just lets go. He just lets go of the pillow. And she's crying and she's trying to catch her breath. And she's like, why? Why would you do that to me? Because, at this point, she still thinks they're close. And he tells her, he says, you better not tell anybody, or next time I won't lift the pillow and let you go. She said she was just petrified. Yeah, I get that. We all would be. So, she never told anybody. At that point on, he was no longer her caring, loving brother. He was a monster in her eyes. And this continued. The terror and abuse just continued and continued as they got older. She said Ricky became very unpredictable. And then she tells us another harrowing, horrible experience that she had. She said she went to the kitchen one day after they had ate supper. She wanted a piece of pie. She went to the kitchen to get her a piece of pie. And Ricky was already in there. And as soon as she gets in there and he sees her, he tells her to leave. Go. I don't want you in here. Whatever. I don't know. He just tells her to leave. And she's like, okay, let me get my piece of pie and I'll leave, right? She said he got so mad at her that he punched her in the face. Knocked her down. Or, he punched her in the face. She didn't fall down at first, apparently. She fought back for a little bit. And then he eventually had her on the ground and he just beating her. Just beating her. And she's crying. She's screaming. And at this time, I'm like, where is help? There's 8 other siblings who I've got to think somebody is old enough to step in and stop this. And then there's mom. And I don't know. But then she does say that their mom showed up and had a knife and had it, I guess, pointed at Ricky and told him to stop, to get up and stop. And Karen was like, he's going to attack mom. She really thought that he was going to attack mom. And he stopped and he looked at their mother for quite a while and then just got up and left. Just left. So at that point, a couple things. Apparently, if mom knew to come and help with a knife, things were not good. But they're not telling us this. Because when my kids fought, no matter if they were punching each other, rolling around the ground, I would jump in the middle of it and get them, right? I never thought, even once, to pull a knife to separate them. It was never needed. So, yeah, there was something more going on that they haven't told us. And then Karen said her mom and her never discussed it, never talked about the incident, and they were not allowed to talk about it to other people. So I got to thinking, there was time, obviously, where this kind of situation was taboo. It's still not talked about a lot. There's still a lot that needs to be done and said about abuse. But at this time period, and I had to look, and it was probably the 60s. Yeah, it would have been in the 60s. In my opinion, probably late 60s, early 70s. Just wasn't talked about a lot. So, it's sad, and it's heartbreaking that Karen didn't feel like she could talk to anybody. 8 siblings and a parent, and none of them wanted to talk about it. So, Karen said, and I quote, "What goes on in this house stays in this house," end quote. And, that just sounds like something that their mom probably said as a way of coping. I don't know. But at the same time, it's sad to me that out of, and I'm not counting Richard or herself, so 8 siblings, she felt she had nobody and a mother. And I've got to think they all knew what was going on, right? I don't know. So eventually, and this is where timing gets weird. So just bear with me, because eventually Ricky moves out and joins the military. So we know he's old enough to join the military, and I think that's 18. Pardon me, I honestly am not sure. Yeah, but I would probably bet money that that's 18. And so she was relieved. She thought things were finally going to be good, that she was out from under him, the threat was gone, whatever. And then she makes the comment that she hoped military would change him. And unfortunately, in too many situations, I think there's a huge misconception on that. I think people believe that if someone already has anger issues or, problems, they will go to the military and it will fix them. Did not mean to make those wings that big, but hey, there you have it. But that's not the case. Very, very rarely can I say I've heard a story. Oh yeah, he was so angry and so, pissed off at the world, but he went to the military and came back a new man. He was fixed. He was fine. There was no more problems. That just does not happen. And it's not stated here, but I'm going to say it's probably not happened there either. Well, it is stated here because the whole story, if he had gone and got help or changed, their story wouldn't have existed, right? It would just been a brother torturing his sister. Anyways. So, I don't know how long he was in the military, but Karen was free. She was happy. Life was good. Dun, dun, dun. Until it's not, right? So, one day, Karen comes home from school, and her mom is sitting in the kitchen, waiting on her, and tells her that Richard was coming home, and he got discharged early. Now, I kind of skipped a little bit, so let me go back. While he was at the military, he got married. And apparently, Karen was really, really good friends with the wife. She was even the maid of honor. So she's glad that he's gone, but she's still having something to do with him, right? She's talking to his wife, whatever. So when he comes back, Karen says, I don't know what happened. I don't know the what's, why's, or how's, but I knew he wasn't honorably discharged. And that was what went through my head, too, when he said he was discharged early. You don't just get discharged early without a reason, right? And I'm not going to say that everybody's discharged early is dishonorable, but, we are talking about this guy, so I don't have it. I did not confirm this, but I'm pretty sure that he was not honorably discharged. So, anyways, like I said, it's about to get a little weird because at this time, the reenactments, it looks like Karen's probably in her teenage years. She talks about coming home from school when he's coming. She finds out that he is discharged after she come home from school and her mom was sitting there waiting. And then I don't know, and I really do get hung up on this, but I really don't know timing, because then she says their mother died. Okay. Ricky gets divorced from his wife. He's messing around on her with other women. And then she tells us a story, Karen does, of when she was living on her own. Well, okay, so she had her own apartment, but she had a roommate, and her roommate was Ricky's ex. So I don't know how many years have gone by. Like I said, I'm probably putting too much emphasis on that, but I don't know. So anyway, so she's telling the story of one day her and the ex-wife, which I never get a name, so unfortunately she's just the ex-wife, are just, what she says, chilling in their apartment. And they get a phone call, and the ex-wife roommate answers, and it's Ricky. And I will say I was very confused in all of this, because my best guess in timing was this is probably the 80s, and I don't think there was cell phones, but the next comment she makes me think it could have been in the 90s when cell phones were around. So the ex is on the phone with Ricky arguing. She had started dating someone, and Ricky wasn't happy about it. Too damn bad, in my opinion, but hey, I'm just my opinion. And Karen's like, next thing she knows, Ricky is pounding on the door while on the phone with Karen. So either there's some kind of, either it's the time of cell phones or the timeline's a little off. But either way, Ricky shows up at the door, pounding on the door, just screaming at both women, has a gun in his hand, and just losing his ever-loving mind. And Karen, scared for her life, calls the cops. And when he finds out she's called the cops, he runs for it. So all's good. And she said, she gives her statement, the cops come up and they go looking for him. And next thing she knows, she said one of her older brothers, and it's the only time another sibling is mentioned. One of her older brothers shows up to talk to her. Said that Ricky just called him and is upset because she told him there was a gun, or the cops that there's a gun, and the cops are looking for him and the gun. And he, the brother, wants her to tell the cops that there was no gun. And Karen's furious at this point, and me too, because the older brother has shown up after Ricky has shown up at Karen's house, threatening her with a gun. And he's like, can you just not tell the cops there was a gun here? Thank you, that'd be great. And Karen's like, what are you doing? Why are you protecting Ricky and not me? He came here to threaten us, her and the ex-wife. And you are more concerned about Ricky? I mean, she was mad, and she had every reason to be mad. And I was like, you go, girl. You tell him, because that's exactly what it was. But I don't know. I'm sure he had been in trouble with the law, whatever, and the gun charge was going to really hurt him. They never specify. But the brother's like, look, if you drop the gun charges, Ricky says he'll never bother you again. He'll disappear from your life and you won't ever have to see him again. She said, I was mad. Like, just furious. But at the same time, that sounded really good too. Never having to see him again. So she said she thought about it, and eventually she's like, fine. I don't ever want to see him again. He's out of my life. I'll drop the charges. And at that point, I'm like, you already told the cops that there was a gun. So I guess you're just going to say you're mistaken and there was no gun. Okay, fine. But what about the ex? What in the world would pursue her to change a statement? Because she had to give a statement too, right? And she probably mentioned the gun just as well. So why would she say, oh no, he didn't have a gun? Did he offer her the same? I mean, and the cops had to know that something was up for her to say all of a sudden that there was no gun. So I don't know. It seemed fishy to me. However, Karen did change her statement, took the gun charge out, and thankfully, he disappeared from her life. And you know, she made him deal with the devil, but she's like, I felt free. Knowing he was going to be gone, I didn't have to deal with him. I just felt free. And with a deal like that, with the devil, I can say I might have done the same thing. I really don't know. I don't know. Because in the end, Ricky is still Ricky. And he was going to turn his attention to someone else, right? He wasn't just going to stop all the abuse and crazy behavior just because Karen dropped gun charges. Well, and he didn't. However, he turned it to someone else, and that someone else would be Vernita. So now we're going to talk to Vernita. So like I said, Karen's story led up to a certain age. I don't know what that age was, to be quite honest. I don't guess there was any overlap between Karen and Vernita at this point. Like I said, they didn't know each other, personally never met. I know later in the story, I think they talk at least once or twice, maybe not. They might not have ever talked. But now we're going to hear from Vernita. And Vernita says that when she first met Richard, he was tall, dark, handsome. She had just gotten divorced from her husband, and she was just drawn to him immediately. Now, I will say what I read later on, and I'm mentioning it now because I don't mention it later, but I think they knew each other. I think that Richard was friends with Vernita's husband. It says something about Richard was dating a girl and was friends with Vernita and her husband, and they would kind of hang out. So the reason I mention this is because then it states that Richard is the reason that Vernita left her husband, because he's the one that told her that her husband was cheating on her. So the reason I mention it is because you see, and Vernita might not be able to see, but he's a schemer. And he wants Vernita, so he's breaking up her marriage. So I just thought that was kind of a character development thing that we learned about. So, I don't know. Richard's devious, but she's divorced her husband, and she was drawn to Richard. And that really didn't have anything to do with the story. Like I said, it was just a character development. Something that I thought I would mention. Anyways, at this point, I notice, and I found it very odd, because I've watched so many of these, and don't think I've ever seen this. But, so when you see their names, and the Evil Live Here puts her names out there, and you're like Karen Williams, and under her name is Richard Ellerby's sister. Well, Vernita Cockerham, under her name was Richard Ellerby's widow. And at that point, and I noticed at this point of the show, I didn't know, but he's dead. And then I'm like, okay, whatever he's done earned him the death penalty or whatever. So I just thought it was interesting, because I know I've seen shows where the person has passed on for different reasons, but I've never can say I have noticed that it says widow. And I could be wrong. Anyways, so Vernita is his widow. Richard is gone. We do not know the what's Windsor house, and we'll find that out. So anyways, Vernita says when she and Richard were together, and just a note, she never calls him anything but Richard. So with Karen, he was Ricky. He was the brother Ricky. With Vernita, it's all Richard. Not that that matters. I just thought it was interesting because normally, like my husband's name's Christopher. I have always called him Chris. There's literally nobody in his life that calls him Christopher. So it would be weird if someone did call him Christopher. And Christopher, I don't know. I found that kind of weird. Anyways, again, I'm digressing from the story here. So they enjoyed riding bikes and jogging together like normal people. They did normal people things. And she says they got along really, really well. She never saw any other side of him to think that, you know, there was any way to distrust or doubt the person he was showing her. Anyways, and she says she had a daughter. And Richard was a good father figure. He raised her daughter and treated her daughter as her own. And she loved that about him. All of us would, right? So, they eventually get married and have 2 sons. Again, timelines. I don't know anything about when all this happened, but at time, I don't know how old the children were or whatever. She tells us a story when her daughter was 8. And later on, while I'm doing my research, I find out more about how old her daughter was when Richard and Vernita got together and yada, yada, yada. At this point, I don't know. So I don't know how long Richard had been in their life. I don't even know if they're married yet. But I will start by saying trigger warning. We are going to be talking about animals and yeah, when I read this part, my stomach just dropped. So if anything like that bothers you, please fast forward a little bit. I'll try to get through this part as quick as possible. So when her daughter was 8, they bought her daughter a dog. And Vernita and her daughter loved this dog. Absolutely loved this dog. Named her Lady. And they just played and, I mean, just loved having the dog. But the dog kept having litters of puppies. And Vernita's like, it had litter after litter after litter of puppies. Which, again, I don't know the time period. I don't know their financial situation. I don't know much about anything. But I'm like, I wish they could get this baby's fixed. Because, you know, it's not good for the dog. It's not good for anybody. But they were having these litter of puppies. And they were giving them away, finding neighbors and friends that wanted them. But they absolutely loved having puppies. Until one day they started noticing the puppies were disappearing. Again, please skip forward if this is going to be hard to hear. So they are outside, and I don't know where they live, if it's a subdivision, if it's out in the country, or what. I know where they live now, but not because the story tells me, but because I did my own research, and I'll tell you that here a little bit. But it looked like their backyard maybe butted up to some woods. So they were out there yelling for the puppies, and they weren't coming. And Vernita's like, well, they're not coming in. We need to go inside and get ready for supper. So she says she turned to go in the house with her daughter, and noticed that there was a new platform that Richard had built that was on the back of the house. So she sent her daughter in, and she said, I really had a bad feeling about this platform. She said it had a trap door, and beside the platform was a bag of lime. Said she did. She had an awful feeling about that, but she had to open it up and find out what was inside it. So she did. And when she did, there was a bag full of puppies that he had suffocated and killed and had it in the platform, trapdoor, whatever it was he bought or built, and was going to dispose of the bodies with lime. So, yeah. Okay. We're past that. If you want to come back. So she's like, something ain't right with him. Something going on, and I don't know what it is. So she's like, I am going to try to find out. Well, no, first she confronts him on why he did this. And he was very nonchalant. He's like, we cannot afford these puppies. I can't afford to feed them, and you're not getting rid of them fast enough. So that's when she realized, you know, if his mind went there, something's wrong. There's better ways to do this. So she said at this point, as his wife, she wanted to try to figure out what was going on with him. And she wanted to talk to his siblings. And he made it hard for her to do that. He didn't want her talking to her siblings. And she doesn't say how he made it hard, just that he made it very difficult for her to talk to his siblings. Ooh, that's going to be dark. And in a rare instance, Karen comes in and says that Richard did not want Vernita talking to his siblings, because, especially her, because he knew she was going to tell him, or tell Vernita everything. She was going to tell Vernita everything that he had done to her and everything that he was capable of, and the truth of growing up with this man. And Richard did not want that. So I'm not really sure, like I said, how he made it hard for her to reach out. Maybe he didn't tell her names and, you know, find numbers. I really don't know. But she never got a chance to reach out and talk to the siblings. And Karen says, I thought everything was okay with his life. Once he moved down there, which, again, he's no longer in Jersey. They have moved on to a different part. And I will say, just to make it clear, so it's not confusing, they moved to North Carolina. So Vernita, in this buildup, is in a new spot with no family, friends, in a new town. And she has got her daughter and 2 children, or 2 boys from Richard. She's kind of isolated. They're from Jersey, which she is from Jersey as well. And try to get that blended. Oh, that looks muddy. Okay, we will work on that. I got time. Wow, it all looks muddy on the video. It's really not. Anyways, so Karen thought everything was fine. She hadn't heard from him. Everything was great. She hadn't talked to Karen, or Karen hadn't talked to Vernita. You know, she just thought things were fine in his life. Yeah, they weren't. So apparently, Richard had started turning his anger towards Vernita. And I have a feeling he probably had been doing this well before they talk about it. But now we're talking about it. And Vernita tells us that a story that her daughter had a really good relationship with her father, right? And she would go see him and spend time with him, whatever. And Richard didn't like that. Richard tried to stop the daughter from seeing her father, didn't want her to have anything to do with him. He was jealous of her father and the time they spent together. And but Vernita stepped in every time and told her daughter she could go, you know, have fun, go see your dad, blah blah blah. And Richard didn't like that. He didn't like being, you know, contradicted. And I say this is how it is type of situation. But, so he would beat her. She tells us that she was so hopeless. This was her husband. This was the father of her children, and she didn't know what to do. But the abuse was bad. So, like, he would strike her, start hitting her, punching her, and then he would sexually assault her. Which I hate using that. But, you know, YouTube doesn't like it when you use the word that it really is. So he would sexually assault her, hold her down as he's doing it, put a pillow over her head, and try to smother her while he's assaulting her. And he would tell her, and I quote, this is what he's saying to Vernita, that he was my God, and he could stop me from breathing, end quote. And you know, I have to think, where were those boys? Where were his children? You know, I don't know. It's never mentioned. I hope to God he never saw, or they never saw anything that Dad did to their mother. But I really don't know. So she is being abused in multiple ways, and she feels helpless. She doesn't feel like there's anybody she could talk to. She has no family there, and I'm just, I feel for her. God, I feel for her. It's awful. Awful. And finally, after one incident, she had had enough. So he got mad at her again. I'm sure none of us are shocked. He started beating her, but then proceeded to take a baseball bat and hit her over the head with it, at which time she called the cops. And I have a feeling the cops have been called a lot, and I want to tell you now, they were. She had those bad boys on speed dial, and we'll get into all that. But, so, she had actually told him, I guess, that she wanted a divorce, and then it proceeded to get that bad. So she calls the cops, and the cops come in and arrest him. You know, she's been hit in the head. She's bleeding. She's, you know, cops are going out, and as they are taking him out for domestic abuse, he turns around and tells her, I'll see you soon. He's in handcuffs being taken out, and he's threatening her, and the cops aren't doing anything. And she says, by 7 o'clock that night, he is out. He is put in jail for domestic charges, and hours later, he is out of jail. And she says, it became horrible. He started stalking her, and just the constant threats just amped up. I want to say that domestic abuse laws have come a long way, but there's still a long way to go. And in this point of the story, we're probably in the 90s. I have no real confirmation yet. I'm pretty sure we're in the 90s. And they were not as good as, you know, they are now. So I'll take that into advisement as I get very upset going forward. So he's out at 7 o'clock that night. And immediately the threats start, and he stalks her. So he would follow her around and be in places like supermarket, like Walmart, or wherever it is they shopped. He would be there, and he would follow her until she saw him. He'd make sure she saw him, and then he would wink at her as he's walking by. And you know, some people can say that that's not a threat. I disagree. This man has physically beat you with a bat. You have him arrested. You're trying to separate from him, divorce him, and he shows up where he shouldn't be and winks at you, basically saying he knows that he can get by with it. It's actually quite terrifying. So she calls the cops, and love her heart, I'm telling you right now, those cops were on speed dial. She knew them all by name and number, and she did everything she was supposed to do. But she called the cops, and they told her that because he was in a public place, there was nothing they can do. Yeah. And let me just tell you right now, that's bullshit. Because she had an EPO out on him. She had a protective order. Yes. And this becomes a big point of the story here. So every time he would break the restraining order, she would call the cops. Unfortunately, they were doing not much about it at all. So, yeah. Believe me, if you think that pisses you off now, just hold on. So, she's terrified. She can't go anywhere. He is showing up everywhere, places he's not supposed to be. And getting by with it. Winking at her. He knows. So she changed all the locks on her house. And I'm going to say, I thought she was being very brave. And she even nailed her window shut. I have honestly never been scared enough that I even considered nailing my window shut. And that's such a scary concept. I mean, to think that someone is that scared. And I really wish that it would worked for her. Didn't. But, yeah. So, she gets home one day. And she goes into the house. And she tries to turn the lights on. You know, she's flipping the switch or whatever. And nothing's happening. So, you know, obviously, she's thinking something ain't right, whatever. She gets her flashlight and looks around the house and notices that things have been moved. And the fuse box is open and has been tampered with. So at this point, my happy ass would have trucked it out of there. Unless I thought the kids were there. And in that case, it would have kept me there because I would have had to check on them. And I really don't know if that's what she thought, but she didn't leave. She did call the cops. I don't know if they told her they would be there or what. It never states if the cops were coming to help her or if she's just like reporting a possible break-in. You know, my husband's stalking me, threatening my life, but hey, don't worry about coming down and checking on me. So she goes around and checks out the rest of her house, which I have to think is because she thinks the kids are there and could be in danger. So she says she gets to her bedroom, the one that she used to share with Richard. And on the bed, I hate when I do that she used to share with Richard, on his side of the bed is a note. And the note says, let me find it. I will kill you, you will die. End quote. And at this point, I'm like, the police are still doing nothing for you? All right. She never says if the police did anything, if he was ever arrested. Yeah, that he is physically breaking into her house, pretty much letting her know that he can get in anyone, anytime, any way he wants. And that's that. So, in another very sad statement, she states, I knew he was going to kill me. And she needed protection. She wasn't getting protection. So she bought a gun. I'm not going to discuss gun laws. I'm not going to discuss our own personal thoughts or feelings. But I'm going to say I've never had to have a gun because I was scared that somebody was going to kill me. She carried this gun with her everywhere. So she tells the story. You can't make this shit up. You really can't. So at this point in her life, she is pretty much isolating her and her children to the house. They're not leaving. They're not going anywhere. They're not doing anything. She's trying to stay away from him, trying to stay safe, trying to stay alive. And, you know, Richard ain't gonna let that go. So one night, shoot, I thought I got all the glue off. She's in her kitchen and looks out, and Richard is across the street, and apparently there was a church across the street. So he's in this churchyard digging holes. Yeah, not a freaking bit creepy, right? And then because when he sees her standing there, he calls her. So he knows she is seeing him at this point. And he tells her, says that, do you see me digging these graves? This is where you and the kids are going. She calls cops. Good old boys. And she says, they showed up. She doesn't know what was said to them, but he just leaves. And I'm like, wait a damn minute. Wait a minute. She has a restraining order. He's obviously, I won't say obviously, he's probably breaking at the moment as he is standing across the street from their house making subtle threats. But not only that, he is in a church yard digging holes. And you just let him leave? Vernita says, and this is such, how she says this, I pictured it immediately and knew exactly what she meant. And it, believe me, broke my heart. But she said Richard was a ticking time bomb. She felt like she was watching the fire on the wick headed to the dynamite and not being able to stop it. That's a great visual. That's a great visual. And she says, and I quote, you can see it. You can smell it, but you can't put it out. It's going to pop, end quote. She's right. She's right. Because after that, we finally are given a date. So, November 19th, 2002. It says, on this date, Richard's rage finally explodes. So many opportunities to keep this from happening. Okay. Vernita tells us that she comes home and sees that her door is ajar. And again, I'm like, why are you going in? You're being threatened. This dude is trying to kill you. But again, if your kid's potentially in there, I'm walking in. But it doesn't say she had her gun. So we find out she had a gun, but I've never once read where she actually pulled it and used it. So she goes into the house, which I wish she would have pulled the gun. And she's yelling for her daughter. And instead, Richard comes out. And he says that he's killed her daughter. And he's holding a knife. Of course, Vernita isn't going to take his word for it. She wants to see her daughter. You know, so she's trying to ignore him and walk around him and find her daughter. And instead, he attacks her. Full on attacks her, starts stabbing her. And he cut her throat multiple times. I'll talk about all the locations he stabs her here in a minute. But she was fighting for her life. And she says that the last thing she remembers was looking at Richard and saying, Jesus, quote, Jesus will save me, you're not my God, end quote. Pretty damn profound. Because if you remember, every time he attacked her, he told her he was her God and could keep her alive or dead. And she's like, no, you're not, bitch. No, you're not. So she blacks out and says that when she came to, she was at the hospital. And she was disoriented, obviously, not knowing what's going on. I don't really know how long she was out, but she was at the hospital. And critical. They didn't think she was going to live. She didn't think she was going to live. I mean, it was pretty bad. So then she starts showing us like her wounds, her defensive wounds. So her hands had been, where she was trying to prevent herself from being stabbed, were cut so bad she has hooks in her hands to connect her fingers. Then she shows a cut across her throat. That one was a very severe, almost life-ending throat cut. Then 2, like on her neck. 2 in her skull. Like, how hard are you stabbing somebody that you're breaking through skull? And many across her body that she doesn't show us. But she says the biggest scar that she has from that day is in her mind. And it wasn't for 3 days. She finally finds out what happened to her kids. She finds out that Richard is still on the run and hadn't been found. And she was scared for herself and at the kids because she honestly hadn't been protected. She hadn't, had anybody to rely on. And he's on the run and she doesn't know where her kids are. And if you remember, he told her that he killed her daughter and yada, yada, yada. I mean, yes, it would be awful. And the doctors didn't want to tell her anything because she was already worked up and the stress can make it worse. And they didn't want her to bleed. Apparently she only had 1 stitch holding her artery together. But the doctors needed her to stay calm, and they knew the only way it was going to do that is to finally tell her what was going on. So when the doctors told her what happened, there was 2 of them that came in. One of them literally set and held a gauze on her throat with pressure so she wouldn't break it open, while the other one told her what happened. Her daughter had been murdered. And I want to say, I should have known better, but this whole time, I've purposely not said what her daughter's name was because I wanted to protect her daughter. And it never even dawned on me that they were telling us, typically they don't give that information because when they were talking about Vernita's sons, I still don't know their names. I saw it when I was doing some research. I didn't pay attention to it because they deserve their privacy. But, so I didn't even think about the fact that if they were telling us the name probably wasn't a good sign. But I was purposely not saying her name to protect her. So I'll tell you now, her name is Candace. Candace was stabbed. This is another trigger warning. This is not pleasant, and it's very hard. So if you need to skip through a couple seconds, go ahead. She was stabbed, and then he duct taped her face, her whole head, arms, legs, and then beat her to death. What a tragically horrible way to die. So Vernita thinks that when Richard came to the house that day, his goal was to kill them all. Vernita believes that Richard wanted Candace to go pick her stepbrothers up from school, and when she wouldn't, that was the, I guess, overkill when he killed Candace. But, because she defied him. You didn't defy Richard. You just, you paid for it. So Vernita said that was literally the hardest day of her life. Candace had just turned 17. So Vernita was still in the hospital when Karen found out her brother had committed murder and was still on the run. And she apparently had children at this point and had told them that no matter what, don't open the door for anybody, any strangers. So she didn't know what Richard's goal was, but she wasn't gonna, be a sitting duck. She didn't want him just showing up and the boys not, or I don't know if she had boys, girls, whatever, but her children not know not to open the door. And I think they were still living in New Jersey. So it was days later they found out that where Richard had gone and that he was dead. And there was a lot of relief. And in a twist I wasn't expecting. Like I said, didn't know anything about this story. Had no idea. And when I saw that Vernita was his widow, I thought he had been executed. He had been arrested and tried, and he had been executed. Well, Richard likes to do things the hard way. And Richard drove himself to a gas station, got some gas, went to an abandoned warehouse, which thankfully he went to an abandoned warehouse. He could have done so much more and caused so much more pain if he had tried to do this at anywhere else where there was other people. Then he poured the gasoline all over himself and set himself on fire. And I'm like, damn, dude. Really? Who does that? Who sets himself on fire? To me, that is one of the two worst ways to dies. And he's all about doing it to himself. So, I don't know if I've ever heard of anybody setting himself on fire. I really don't know if I have. So now, okay, we know Vernita has survived. Richard is dead. 3 years after all this happened, Karen reaches out to Vernita. And tells her that she believes everything that she has said about what Richard has done. Like the pillow instance and the beating and the hitting and whatever. Karen tells her she believes her. And Vernita at first is pissed. She's like, what do you mean? This happened to you and you did not warn me. And I gotta say, I understand that. like 100% if you knew somebody was dangerous and you didn't tell me and I am in a relationship with that person, even if you don't know me, if you know that person and there's a reason for you to think my life could be in danger, you should have told me. And she was asking why. Why would you not tell me this? It would have made a difference. It would have, helped. But how would Karen know that? She didn't know Vernita. And here's the thing. And Karen doesn't say this. I'm just playing devil advocate. If she had said something to Vernita and Vernita didn't believe her, and then Richard found out that Karen said something like that, what would have kept Richard from going back after Karen? So, I don't know. What would you have done? In my mind, I would have liked to think I'd told somebody. I would like to think so. Anyways, so Vernita was pissed. And she was just like, it would have made a difference. It could have helped. But Vernita said, I realized, and I'm going to say this, and if I haven't said it already, Vernita's one strong-ass woman. Very admirable. But she's like, I realized Karen was a victim too. She was terrified of him as well. So she said afterward, she kind of understood. And Vernita seems like one hell of a strong lady. She really does. And, Karen kept telling Vernita, you're not to blame for what happened. She said, I understand as parents, we blame ourselves when things happen to our kids. She said, you're not to blame. This was Richard. Richard is the bad seed. Richard did all of this. And she said Vernita said eventually, it helped. It helped. It finally gave her strength. She was talking about it, the tragedy and what happened, but it finally gave her the strength to really pursue this, and you'll hear all about that soon. She said, so she's able to talk about it, and the more she talks about it, the more she heals. She says, yeah, we'll talk about that here in a minute, but then we see Karen and Vernita meeting for the first time. So they don't meet until December 2017 when they come together for the filming of this show. And there's a video of it, and it's such a touching video. It really is, because they're crying and they're hugging, and it's a touching moment. It really is. And you can tell these two have been through a lot. And we're kind of bonding over being survivors. So in closing, Vernita says that when she sees the scars across her throat, she tells herself, and I quote, he tried to silence you. You're not silenced. He tried to kill you. You're not dead. You have a purpose. End quote. What a profound statement. And I am going to say this woman made her purpose. And she made sure everybody knew her purpose and made a difference. She says, I can never get Candace back, but I can make sure to tell her story so no one else has to die like that. Very profound. So that is the end of the story there. And there's a lot I didn't know and a lot I needed to look up, and we will. We're going to start, and I'm going to keep it very, very brief on Richard, because that piece of crap, and I hope it doesn't offend anybody, but that piece of crap doesn't deserve any more of our time. We just sit there and listen to his whole story. So I'm just going to tell you the basics of his obituary. That's all I looked up was his obituary. He was born September 18th, 1956 in Germany. He grew up in New Jersey. He was 46 years old when he snapped and killed Candace, hurt Vernita, and unalived himself. And that's all that I'm going to say about that. So now on to Vernita. Because let me tell you, she's the hero. She is the hero. She has survived and has done so much. And I want to talk about Vernita. And I feel like I didn't really look too much into her past. I know she was born in 1969, so she was actually 13 years younger than him. She had 3 siblings. I think they said sisters. And she was born in New Jersey. She was 33 years old when the events happened that changed her life forever. So now I start on cinemaholic.com, which you know is one of my favorite places to go because it gives an in-depth of what we just watched. So about The Evil Lives Here, it gives a little bit more detail about it that we're not seeing on the screen. And the article is titled, Candace Cockerham Murder. Is Richard Ellerby dead or alive? So the article discusses, like I said, The Evil Lives Here episode and the tragic murder of 17-year-old Candace Cockerham in Jonesville, North Carolina, November 2002. And this is the first time that we find out this is where I find out that they live in North Carolina and they came from New Jersey, whatever, because it was never mentioned in the episode. Never. And the episode states, or not episode, the article, apologize. The article states, and I quote, "The episode is a testament to how sometimes domestic abuse victims are rendered unsafe by the judicial and police system of the country, and abusers are able to get their way," end quote. Yes. There's a whole lot to this story that we don't know as far as the domestic abuse goes, and I'll touch on part of it. I don't go into big details of it because we get the gist. Vernita was a battered woman. Okay, so the article states that Candace's death paved the way for Vernita to fight the state legislature, I always say that wrong, I apologize, and sue the city police for their negligence. Yes. Then the article talks about Candace, and we learn a little bit more about her as a person. So let's take a little bit more time to learn about this child. She deserves it, right? Okay. Candace was born in August 1985 in Jonesville, North Carolina. She was 6 years old when her mom and dad divorced. So I know she was 8 when they got the puppies, that whole story. And she was 17 when she died. So I don't know how long Richard and Vernita were married, but I know they were together for quite a number of years. She lived with her mom after this separation and divorce. And it states that Candace was a friendly teen who could make friends easily. And as a senior in high school, she wanted to serve her country and actually had an appointment with an Army recruiter. And on that fateful day in November, her mom had dropped her off at the library so she could go and take notes and be prepared for her meeting with the recruiter in a couple days. Her body was found by the police in a downstairs bedroom in the house that she lived with her mother and 2 siblings. The article states the police knew immediately who the killer was. At this point, it doesn't mention Vernita's attack. It will get to it. But, okay, hold on. Let me get through this part here. Okay, so I get through I had a whole bunch of notes that I've already talked about, so I needed to get through it. So at this point, they talk about Vernita's attack. And it differs a little bit from what she says in Evil Lives Here, and I think it's just a memory thing. Because when you're being attacked, you black out. You do not always remember correctly. And you do what you got to do to survive. And that's what she did. So it says, I lost it again. When she was being attacked by Richard, she was able to escape and ran to the police department that was near her home. So there's a police station near where she lived. She collapsed in front of the police station. And then they went to their home. They knew who she was. She was very vocal and called them all the time. They had been to her house numerous times. They knew who she was. So when she collapsed, they knew immediately to go to her house. And that's when they found Candace. And Richard was on the run. And I just have so much... I'm so pissed off. The police station was that close. And she was calling them as often as she was. And you'll hear, how can we not protect her? How can we not protect her? She did everything that she's supposed to do. And it wasn't enough. So Richard unalived himself on November 22nd, 10 days after the attack on Vernita and murdering Candace. And I told you he got the gas, poured it on himself, caught himself on fire in the warehouse. What it didn't tell you until just now is there were 2 young men that saw this happen. And how tragic. So Richard is just continuing to ruin people's lives, right? And these 2 men probably see this guy pour something over top of their head and then set himself on fire, and they're probably like, what the is going on? I mean, so he's probably ruined 2 other people's lives in the process, because who in their right mind is going to think someone's setting themselves on fire? So now I'm in Oprah.com, and the article is titled, "A Woman's Gutsy Legal Battle Ends, but Her Crusade to Protect Others Continues." This article talks about the 5-year battle over the injustice of Candace's death and her life-threatening assault by her estranged husband. The case was against the town of Jonesville and 2 specific police officers. 2 police officers that are named specifically in the suit. The 2 people she called the most, the one that she knew was not helping her. The article states that Vernita had a restraining order against Richard. And every time he violated the order, she called the cops for help. The police would always assure her that he would be picked up and arrested, and never was. Even the evening before the attacks, he broke the order. She called them. We'll go pick him up. And they never did. So the case had a monetary value, which I found out was like $400,000, and it's not nearly enough. But Vernita says, and I quote, "I was never there to beat up the town financially, to get millions and millions of dollars. I began the case. I believe we put it in for $10,000 because I wanted to start a shelter for battered women." End quote. She is an active volunteer and speaker with the North Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence. She's very active with this group in speaking and telling her story. She's an advocate that has helped make direct changes to legislature where they can hide behind the wording of the law. So apparently, the cop's defense was, the protection order doesn't say I have to pick him up when you call me. We'll get to it. And then it was like, well, can you prove that he actually violated that? It's your word against his. So they were hiding behind the wording of the law. And Vernita was like, no, bitch, we ain't doing that no more. That's over with. So I don't understand how you could possibly try to justify. But they did. And that was the case. And they lost. So Vernita started what is called Candace's Law. And that law is, quote, "It directs the police officers to make an arrest when they have probable cause to suspect that a protection order has been violated," end quote. So don't ask for proof. Did anybody see this? It's just your word against his. Or say, we'll get to it. No, you pick them up immediately. You go get their ass. Get them off the get them behind bars, protect somebody. Her goal was to work where the police officers cannot hide behind that wording. It's such a tragic occurrence, the whole situation. And it's awful that it took the death of an innocent 17-year-old for people to notice and make change. I mean, it's awful that this woman was begging for help as she's being abused by her husband and nobody helped her. But it resulted in the death of a child. The whole story is tragic. I don't even know how to end this. Like, that's pretty much all of my notes. I've talked about the episode, and it's just, when the judge system fails somebody, man, does it fail them. I'm glad Vernita has really stood up to be the woman that I thought she was this whole time, and has started a new law for her daughter and fighting every day. She's talking about what happened. Like I said, she said, she can't bring Candace back, but she can tell her story and she can prevent this from happening again. And I love that. So good for you. I hope she's doing well. Like I said, I don't know anything decent. I didn't look up any of her siblings. I didn't look up any of Richard's siblings other than Karen, which told her story. I didn't look up Vernita's children, her sons. They all deserve their peace. Every bit of that. They deserve peace. So I hope they have it, and I hope they are living in a place where they're not scared for their lives. I really do. So that's that. That's it. No, thank you. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. What's your thoughts? This was a tough one just because, like I said, domestic violence laws back, so he's born in the 50s, so you got to think from the late 60s on, he was abusing somebody. And laws have come so far, like they've come a long way, but they are not near good enough. Not even close to being good enough to protect the people that need to be protected. So, yeah. What do you think? What's your thought? How do you like this look? I actually really love it. It's very natural. Anyways, thank you for joining me. Guys, I adore you. Thank you for showing up, being there. Let me know what you think. I hope that I see you again at the next video. And until next time, goodbye.